Good morning, everybody. My name's Giles Syrat. Mikhail said he's not going to introduce me, he's just going to give me wine. You're just about my perfect person, Mikhail. Okay, I'm here to talk today about what's new in Apache CloudStack 4.19. Let me just tell you who I am. I'm a PMC member and committer of Apache CloudStack, have been for about a decade. I also founded the CloudStack European User Group, which again, about a decade ago. And pre-pandemic, we used to meet quarterly in various cities throughout Europe. We used to get an attendance about this size and it was all fantastic. During the pandemic, the wheels came off that. So we're just starting to get that sort of going again. And it's really great to be here today with sort of two different communities, right? You've got the Ceph community, you've got the CloudStack community, and hopefully some of the stuff I can talk about today will be of interest to some guys who primarily work with Ceph, and certainly vice versa, what I've heard so far. I also run a company called ShapeBlue. Similar to 42On, we provide support services, engineering services around a particular technology. That technology for us is Apache CloudStack. A long time ago, I was a physicist. I was an engineer a long time ago. I'm a sailor and a hiker. And that is, somebody did ask me earlier, that isn't me sheltering from what's coming from Broadcom VMware at the moment. That is me in a survival suit on a sea survival course some time ago. Okay. I'm going to just do a quick sort of show of hands. I know when everybody registered for this, there was a question that said, why are you coming? Are you coming because of Ceph? Are you coming because of CloudStack? Or I think there was an option to do both. If you said both, can you put your hand up? Okay. If you are here primarily for Ceph, can you put your hand up? Okay. So what I'm seeing is a room, probably because of the logistics, the organization, what have you, which is about 3/4, let's call you Ceph people, and probably about 1/4 CloudStack people. So this talk is about what's new in 4.19. It's the release we've just had. But I was very conscious that if we just dive straight into that without putting some context for those of you who aren't working with CloudStack every day, some of these new features just probably won't make a lot of sense. Okay, so I'm going to do a very, very quick, very high level 101 before I start diving in and looking at new features. Now, depending on whether you read what's on my slide or read what's on the banner over there, you can probably work out what Apache CloudStack is. And you'll also see that as an Apache project, we're not great at marketing, we're not great at consistent messaging, but that's my definition of what CloudStack is. Scalable, multi-tenant, open source, purpose-built cloud orchestration platform for delivering turnkey infrastructure as a service clouds. The important things in there for me, scalability. We see CloudStack used a lot in the service provider space, but we also see it used a lot in the traditional enterprise space. From a scalability viewpoint, the largest production CloudStack cloud around at the moment is about 15,000 physical hosts. We have somebody at the moment who is scaling that to an order of magnitude greater. That's 150,000 physical hosts. You can probably guess the type of organization who's doing things at that sort of scale. It's designed to be multi-tenant from the ground up. Initially, CloudStack, its history was before it was Apache CloudStack, it came from this company called cloud.com. They sold it to Citrix, they donated it to Apache, and then people like us got involved. But it was designed initially as a service provider offering, and probably about 60–70% of the people using CloudStack are still service providers. And that's why we're getting a lot of interest at the moment with what's going on with Broadcom and VMware, because they're basically closing down their service provider channel for anybody under a certain size. But it was designed to be multi-tenant from the ground up. It's open source. And I know a lot of technologies are open source, but I see CloudStack as a very pure open source project. First of all, it's governed by Apache. That has advantages, that has disadvantages, right? It can be very frustrating working in an Apache governed project, but Apache creates this sustainable, long-term organic code, which gives us these products that we've seen around for for decades that just hang around and continue to be successful. It's a cloud orchestration platform, and it's turnkey. I know that's a bit of a dated term, but CloudStack is a product. It's a piece of, it's an orchestrator, but it's not a collection of microservices. It's monolithic, we used to call it. It is a single piece of software. That brings advantages around cost of ownership, ease of administration, ease of deployment, et cetera, et cetera. I promise this 101 won't take too much longer. Broad hypervisor, we consider it hypervisor agnostic, very scalable architecture. It has its own high availability concepts. I mean, we can orchestrate VMware and things like high availability, we can then rely on vCenter to do that, or we can do it ourselves as CloudStack with things like KVM. Its own enterprise networking model, which has been around forever. It is bulletproof and very, very reliable. Web UI, command line, REST API, etc. Integrated end-to-end product, proven at scale, rapid time to value, low implementation costs, focus, user-led development community. And that's another thing. We are an Apache community, but we're user-led. There is no big vendor in Apache CloudStack. It's predominantly people who use the software, organizations who use the software. We as ShapeBlue, you could argue we're a sort of pseudo vendor, we're a services company, but we're only a tiny cog in the whole community. And that makes for a community that's very easy to get integrated, to get involved with if anybody deploys. And our community is great to be here with other people, but we do, as I say, we traditionally have done user groups. There's user groups all over. I run the European one. There's one happening in India, in Hyderabad tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. And they'll have a room about similar size of people like this. Again, predominantly people who are running CloudStack. We're governed by the ASF, as I said. Sort of scale-wise, we're just over about 300 committers in the public. Lots of other committers in the room here from the project today. And we do our own annual conference as well, CloudStack Collaboration Conference. We're in Paris in November. We're going to be in Madrid this November. That's my 101. I'm now going to move on to having a look at our latest release. So for CloudStack 4.19, it says, mic a bit closer, is that better? Thank you. CloudStack 4.19 was released about three weeks ago. It was about 10, 11 months of effort. It was about 11 months since our previous major release. Total list from Jira, GitHub, 315 new issues, improvements, and bug fixes in total. 26 significant new features. I'm going to look at about 6 of them today. My sort of 6 favorite, I think, are the most significant. But if you're running CloudStack, some of the other things might be more significant to you than the things that I've selected. So these are just my personal favorites today. We have a concept of, in the Apache CloudStack community, of a release being an LTS release, and 4.19 is an LTS release. And the idea of this was some people in our community wanted to release faster. They wanted to do monthly releases, weekly releases, fast, and that's fine. But then we've got a lot of people who really don't want to see fast releases because of their attitude to risk, their attitude to change in their environments, and they wanted to know certain releases were going to be around long term. So in CloudStack, we've got this sort of two different release cycles. We've got a fast release cycle, and we've got an LTS release cycle, which is much slower. Having said that, people in our community who used to drive the super fast cycle aren't as interested in doing so anymore. So we're sort of settling down into just our LTS releases most of the time. That'll give it an end of life about 2025. Okay, I'm going to start looking at the features. By the way, rather than waiting to the end for questions, quite happy if anybody's got questions, stick your hand up. I've got a really smart microphone. It's here, and I'm dying to use this microphone. So please, somebody ask a question as we go through. All right, so I'm going to look at 6, 8 of the features that I think are really significant of CloudStack 4.19. First of all, VMware to KVM migration. Now, this has been a feature that's was started nearly a year ago. okay? I know the people who have contributed it, but it's about the timing of when this goes into CloudStack, right? We've always had ways of, we can actually manage VMware infrastructure through CloudStack, and we've had ways to actually connect to a vCenter and bring that into CloudStack. That's always been there. But what we can actually now do is connect to a vCenter or bring it into CloudStack and then migrate it to KVM VMs on the fly, okay? And then deploy those into a KVM cluster. Obviously, as I say, it's about timing. The adoption for CloudStack over the last 5 years has been steady. You look at our statistics in terms of our packages downloads, in terms of who we know is out there. It's been pretty steady, organic growth. In the last 6 months, with what's going on at the two vendors I'm going to get bored of mentioning, it's going like this. It's absolutely crazy because there are tens of thousands of service providers out there who have built their business based around VMware technologies and now going, can't do that anymore. Let's look at alternatives. And I know, a lot of these people are looking at alternatives. Open Nebula, they're looking at OpenStack, they're looking at a whole range of technologies, but a percentage of them are coming through to CloudStack, and it's crazy. Right? But we now have the ability to get VMware VMs, bring them into CloudStack, and convert them on the fly to KVM. We can do it from external vSpheres, vSphere clusters, or if CloudStack is already managing a VMware environment, it can convert those effectively internally. At the heart of this feature, it's using V2V to actually do the conversion to QCal2. But what it's doing is all the clever bits around the edge in terms of the networking, the adapters, etc., to convert from something that can be managed in VMware to something that can be managed in KVM with CloudStack. Linux instances can be done when running. I think there is actually a warning in the documentation which advises instances should be shut down, but it can be done. And what I've seen of it so far, that's pretty successful. For anything Windows-based, it has to be stopped. And I'm not sure why that limitation is. In terms of the destination hosts, the KVM, and this is sort of the main limitations, we've only got particular versions are supported, and this is around what Virt2v supports in terms of actually converting the instance across. And there are some very specific destinations with Ubuntu. You need to make sure MBT kit's involved, etc. There are various things. It's all in the documentation, but this is an action. This is an admin-only feature at the moment in CloudStack. We're not expecting end users to want to do this. That may be an option, but this sort of stuff, preparing for this, is something that would normally be done in advance before actually going and running the tool. And like anything in CloudStack, this is available via our REST API. It's available via our CLI. So the probability of this being just used through the UI is for any sort of scale is very, very low. People are going to batch these conversions. At the same time, we've got an easier way of bringing KVM instances or KVM VMs into become CloudStack instances. We call them instances in CloudStack. It's a VM, same thing. This was always possible, but it was a bit clunky, which involved turning something into a template and then building a new virtual machine based on that template. You can now just from that diagram doesn't very much from any KVM host that the management server can access from a QCal2 file from anywhere basically. And then if you've got unmanaged instances, so KVM hosts that are not managed by CloudStack in your environment, you can just point to those and bring those in. Very, very simple. This is basically just getting the KVM VMs and bringing them under CloudStack's control. Any questions? Okay, another piece of brilliant timing. For a long time, CloudStack's had the ability to live migrate instances between hosts, right? And some time ago, somebody said, well, hold on a second, what about efficiency? What about optimization of how we use those hosts? And lots of different users have done that lots of different ways using the CloudStack API, but there's never been a way to say to CloudStack, right, I want you to balance my load across hosts, or I want you to push as much as possible, concentrate as much as possible into a small number of hosts. This feature in CloudStack is called CloudStack DRS. Anybody answer? What, in another vendor's world, what does DRS stand for? Sorry? Oh, no, another software vendor who I keep mentioning at the moment. Dynamic resource scheduling, is it? Or distribute? Yeah. That is a trademark from VMware. However, the letters DRS are not a trademark from VMware, so the Apache legal team were quite happy for us to call this CloudStack DRS, but I cannot call it CloudStack Distributed Resource Scheduling. There's a question. Right, here comes the microphone. That is a microphone. I was dying to do that. Just talk into it, apparently.
How do you deal with the patents around DRS?
Patents?
Yeah.
There are no patents in terms of moving VMs in from one machine to another that I know of.
The approach around DRS is patented.
Okay.
So might want to watch out for that.
Okay, I'll check for that. Okay. This is simple DRS. It's hypervisor agnostic for again. And we have basically two different algorithms. It's going to move instances between hosts. You can set it globally or on a cluster basis. It's hypervisor agnostic. Okay, it's really, really simple in terms of configuring it. Two algorithms we have is balance, and that is basically going to move the workloads to use as balanced as much of your compute as possible. Move the workloads and even them out. And remember, this in CloudStack world can be at cluster level or it can be globally. Okay, ideal for production environments. And the other simple model we have is condensed, which is when you want to stuff everything into as small a number of hosts as possible to use as little power as possible. And I can't think of any other use cases for that other than maybe moving workloads because you need to do some maintenance on a particular part of a cluster or something like that. It's really simple to configure. There's 6 global settings in CloudStack. You set those and off it goes. It's automatic. There is at cluster level the ability to initiate it manually, but otherwise it's just going to sit in the background just doing its stuff. Okay, VNF's appliance support. Nothing to do with VMware and Broadcom. This is something completely different. CloudStack has got its own virtual networking model. It's been around for a long time. It's very, very reliable, used by lots of people. But there comes a point where that model isn't going to do everything that people want. Okay, it's not going to provide every sort of network service people want. It's not going to provide it by being a particular vendor when their security requirements have said they have to use a Cisco ASA firewall because they're a government organization. We can do what we want with our virtual appliances in CloudStack, but that's not going to meet those objectives. So the idea of building virtual appliance support into CloudStack is that users can actually create VNFs like they would create instances, like they create VMs. Those VNFs are virtual network functions, virtual network appliances, and they can be based on any third-party product as long as they have an image that can be virtualized and turned into a VNF. Now, this has sort of been possible in CloudStack because at the end of the day, a VNF is something that's going to run on a virtual machine and you're going to spin it up and do something. But what this is doing here is actually making the process of that easy, abstracting it away from the end users. And from a service provider viewpoint, it's allowing them to go and sell those products because it's handling things like licensing settings, usage data, all of that stuff. So sort of use cases, an SD-WAN, for example. So we've got, a couple of different zones in availability zones in CloudStack. We want to SD-WAN between them. CloudStack's not going to give you that out of the box. What's this one? Two VPCs. CloudStack has VPCs, but we want to do something clever in between them. Again, CloudStack's not going to give you that. Regular VPCs, if you want to use for, a PF sense or a micro tick or something, CloudStack won't do that, or didn't do that until 4.19. So a VNF appliance, it's very, very simple. Screenshot over there on the right. The admin creates VNF appliance templates, which are a very specific type of template. They've got all the standard stuff that you have for an instance template, but they also have all of the interface information, where its management interfaces, what the credentials, the default credentials are to join its app, where its admin point is that HTTP, how are we going to access that? All of that is created at the template level. And then users just go and choose that template and specify what information they need, and they get that appliance. So it configures all the, all the interfaces, all the various rules that are needed for that device. Admin creates the templates. It records usage, so people, if they're a service provider, can bill for these, or in a private cloud environment, you can monitor the usage, and it can all be deployed through the API if required. This is the template side. So this is what the admin would do in advance. They get their image, their template of whatever the VNF is, specify what it looks like on the networking side, specify what we call VNF details, which are config information you're going to get pumped into the instance, and that's it. People then consume that template. Okay, next new feature, the CloudStack Object Store. CloudStack doesn't do storage, end of. Okay, that's why we're here with you. CloudStack is relatively agnostic, but then we've got deeper integration with a range of storage platforms, Ceph being one of them, of course. And we've always had a tightly limited, a tightly defined scope as an orchestrator. We are not going to get into storage of any type. But CloudStack is the API and the UI that a lot of people are consuming in these organizations. And objects, we've always been able to present volumes out to people. They can consume storage, whatever's being used at the back. But what they've never been able to do is access it through a S3 compliant object store, right? And nearly every service provider we know who uses CloudStack has had to do some sort of integration with something to make that work. So CloudStack now has an object store, but if you look at that first box there on the side, what it actually is a CloudStack object storage framework. CloudStack isn't providing the object storage. Okay, I'll tell you now. The first integration that was done by the people who did this was with MinIO. Work in progress at the moment. Where is he? Guido? Has he disappeared? He's there. Guido, I think you've opened a PR for this. Is that correct? Yep. For Ceph in integration. So we've created a framework in CloudStack to allow people to use any object store. The advantage is at the front end, one UI which people are using already for compute, already for networking, already for bits of storage, now for object storage as well. So it's a framework, it's a connectivity framework. So currently provided for MinIO, Ceph's in progress. There's a simulator there for testing. We've got everything you would expect in terms of the admin creates the object store, the users then create buckets, access buckets. There's a file browser in the UI where you can access it via the API endpoint. Yeah, pretty much it. There's a screenshot there. We're about 5 minutes. Brilliant time. Okay, this doesn't seem at face value like a significant feature. This is a relatively small feature in CloudStack, but this is one of these things that by having this small feature, it opens up a whole world of possibilities. Now, CloudStack has always had the ability for users to basically snapshot, do whatever they want, to create snapshot schedules, and obviously we're just pushing that down to the underlying hypervisor. That has all been done within a zone. It's one of the organizational units of CloudStack, when a zone is basically normally a data center, okay? But what we can now do is snapshot and ask CloudStack to automatically copy that to another zone, i.e. another data center, i.e. off the storage that's here and onto the storage that's over there. Very, very simple feature. Can't remember who actually created it. But what it's doing, of course, is creating a very simple way to think about disaster recovery as a service for people by moving that around between availability zones. Really simple in terms of functionality. When you create your snapshot, whether it's a volume snapshot or a VM snapshot, whatever, okay, you specify the zone that you then also want to copy that to, and CloudStack will handle the copying of that in the background. Scheduled instance lifecycle operations, very, very simple. And it's one of these things, why we never had this in CloudStack before, I don't know. But I can now, based on a time schedule, I can now start, stop, reboot, et cetera, et cetera. We've already got a very, very smart auto scaling feature in CloudStack, and it's very, very good, far more powerful than this, but we've never had the ability just to say, based on a simple time schedule, I want to reboot at this particular time or something like that. We now have OAuth 2 authentication. We've had 2FA for some time using, what's the 2FA protocol? Somebody. Yes, thank you. Now we've got OAuth 2 with Google support, GitHub supports, and again, it's done on a framework basis. So adding in the OAuth 2, are they providers or authenticators? Is very simple. It's got a framework in CloudStack doing it. Good. And that's the ones I chose. In a way, that's my favorite list. There's a lovely thing about being an open source project. We haven't got any product marketing people telling you what are the most significant features. They're just my favorite list. This is some of the other stuff I've saw. I said it's still not the full list of full features, but it's a really nice tool for managing secondary storage, which if you're not running CloudStack won't probably make a lot of sense to you, but for actually managing that down to file level. We've got a safe shutdown feature. The dashboards have been redesigned. CAPC aware CKS. So CloudStack has two forms of Kubernetes integration. It has a CAPI driver provider, like OpenStack does, like AWS does, and what have you. In fact, Dan's, you're talking about this later. But it also has a thing called the CloudStack Container Service, which is a very easy way to allow, particularly service providers, to create Kubernetes clusters out of the box, right? Those two things now talk to each other. Because before, if you created clusters using CAPC or CAPI, CKS wouldn't know they existed, etc. We support vSphere 8. Some new storage extensions, which have been donated by some of the biggest users. Yeah, and some other bits and bobs. So that's 4.19. If you need further information, there's lots of articles out there, some videos. Marco and I recorded a sort of webinar a while ago. There's a source release. There's some convenience packages. You can get to all of this from the CloudStack website. And if anybody is interested in getting involved in the project, there we are on GitHub. I think you're going to get all these presentation files afterwards. Okay, how are we for time? About 1 minute. I'm going to skip this, which also means I don't have to demo with that. I'm around all day. If anybody wants to look at any of these things, just give me a shout. Quickly, any questions? That's me holding my emergency flare. Yeah. I've just been told what was going on at Broadcom. All right, that's it then. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Giles. Super interesting. Very interesting to learn about new features and stuff about CloudStack. Arne.